It is 7:01 PM and the meeting is also being broadcast by Zoom. There are no members of the finance committee on Zoom. All right, so our first order of business is citizen request to address the finance committee. Are there any citizen requests to address the finance committee? No, all right, approval of minutes of prior minutes. I do have two sets for you that I forgot to send out. I will send them out for next week, and we now have someone who's going to help us with minutes.
That's
she's gonna be-
Catherine Coughlin.
Yeah.
She was actually down here
Yep,
just to say that, and
Yep,
she's
I
the
saw
billing
her.
monitor,
Yep.
so she's
Yep.
watching, and then I said I would assist her with names and.
that's what I told her I would do too. Okay, so she'll get plenty of help.
So she was in here like at
Yeah.
6:45.
Perfect. All right, so now let's move on to FY 25 departmental budget hearings. The first one we have is the Office of the Town Manager and Select Board Budget. Tab 23.
Hello, everyone. And everybody hasn't met Miles Tucker, he's that person that put the budget together, the services manager in the office.
So, who's going to take the budget?
I can do it, so the proposed budget for FY 25 has two components, salary and expenses. The salary line item, has a 3% increase, for raises for the 11 FTEs and two, part-time persons who are within the department. The FTE count remains the same from last year, or this, 24. The expenses, have gone up about 41,000, I'm sorry, about $3,871. If we go through the line items, some went up, some went down, but the net out is at, 3,871. There's one DSR 4 on the expense side, and that has to do with the introduction of, new software, to help both the select board and all the boards in the town with agenda and community management, so. That is a proposed DSR 4. The increase there is a one-time expense of 12,000, and then it'll be an annual amount of $23,000. So the initial amount for this year will be $35,000, and then going forward on a $23,000 basis. That's it.
Okay, does anyone have any questions regarding this budget?
Question of the DSR board?
Yeah.
Is this software for just the select board or for all LGPs in town?
For all boards and committees, do you wanna just briefly talk about that?
Sure, just to speak to the point of, accessibility by other town bodies, part of what we would be looking for, and there's a number of municipal agenda softwares out there, is one that would have unlimited licenses. So we would be able to make sure any board and committee liaison would be able to have access to this to assist their board or committee. We would intend to roll it out with the select board and maybe a handful of others, but just make sure we get the glitches out before rolling it, but the intent would, yes, be across all of the committees.
What are its main functions? What,
So there's benefits, we believe, from a staff, a board member, and most importantly, for a resident perspective. When it comes for staff, it's being able to more easily put together an agenda that could automatically translate into minutes, basically streamline that process. You could easily move items from one meeting to the other, and it would, once you get it rolled out, get through sort of the kinks in the system, really cut down the amount of time and effort it would take to get through an agenda. It provides a standardized template for every single committee, which would be very nice from a user perspective when it comes to a resident. For board members, it would give a cloud-based, basically platform where you could access, whether it's a laptop, a mobile device, would be a requirement for whatever system we end up with. And you'd be able to sort of access it as from a board member feature before the meetings, versus having to maybe go through PDF, or for other boards and committees in town, maybe a Word document or whatever gets sent out. From a resident perspective, the key feature of this, which whatever program we would go with, would have agendas, minutes, and any other board documents, not only put out in PDF, but in HTML, which really helps with, if I'm probably using the incorrect term, but for people with visual or audio, different physical abilities, they would be able to more easily access it through the whatever software they would use to help them access it. So there's a real accessibility plus here, as well as integrating videos away from YouTube onto a platform within the site where they would have agenda point. You could basically click on somewhere in the agenda, you go see the video. We've gotten feedback from residents wondering why that is not currently a feature. Some sort of software we would go through would definitely help this.
So how did you come up with $12,000?
We did demos with a few vendors out there, and based on the demos, talking through what we would basically be looking at, we asked them to give ballpark quotes. And the 12,000 was sort of the middle range. The quote, the budget figure you see here is about the middle range between the different vendors for the minimum capabilities we'd be looking at. So this is based on not official RFQs, but ballparking.
Okay, and is this something that would be on the web, or you're looking at something that would be off the web?
It would be able to be integrated into Civic Plus from a user perspective, and from a board member or staff perspective, it would basically be on like any sort of cloud-based portal. You get a web link, you log in, you'd be able to do your stuff, but it would absolutely be able to be integrated into Civic Plus. That is one of the questions we asked of all the vendors, one of which is Civic Plus. That's our own in-house solution.
Okay,
Try not to the website.
Yes.
yeah. So don't go with Brandicus, doesn't work. Just letting you know. You probably already know that. All right, any other questions regarding Office of the Town Manager, Select Board budgets?
I had one question, but it's more about, the select board as the warrant committee. So we had a discussion on October 30th in lead up to the special town meeting about, I think it was Article 14. There were some changes that happened to the warrants after it was closed and but before it was printed, and the finance committee didn't know about that, so we were caught a little off guard. It turned out to be kind of minor, but I was just wondering what the process is. Like, at what point can the warrant be changed after it's closed, and what's the process for communicating that?
So the select board, votes to close the warrant subject to minor technical corrections to be made by me, town council or bond council. Not communicating it, that's on me, so we'll just be much more mindful.
Okay,
We really only make minor changes. It should be communicated.
okay, thanks. The ones we found, well, the ones that I found was just like happenstance, like, because I happened to be communicating with the town council, and if I hadn't been, I wouldn't have found out.
Okay,
Actually, if I can pick up on that.
yeah,
Okay, who writes the descriptions for the articles?
I do, mostly.
And who helps you with that?
Well, so for the capital, they come from the capital plan. For citizens petitions, we ask them for their feedback. We mostly use the citizens petitions language unless there's a problem. We run that by the moderator and town council. The other warrant articles, if there's a select board proponent, they usually help me with that. The planning articles, they do write, I don't write those. And typically the school articles, they write, if there is something that's not capital.
There's, I have one question. Either last year or the year before, I apologize, I don't know which year. I remember we had a discussion, I was trying to recollect it with Dave earlier, where these would be monies used for certain municipal celebrations, or events, and I can't tell you, I know exactly which ones they are, but something like the Blue Tree lighting, or like we used to do New Year's Needham. These would be things that the Needham Business Association is no longer doing, or whatever. Can't really remember.
Yeah.
But I remember with this discussion of us transferring some monies, I thought to the select board town manager budget.
We have an $8,000 line for that. It does cover the blue tree lighting. What else is in there?
Blue tree lighting takes up a plurality of that spend, well, majority of the spending.
Yeah. We did have.
Was that somewhere else?
No, it was new money.
Okay,
Yeah, if you remember, the NBA did it.
Yeah.
Basically, Louise Condon asked
Yeah.
people for money, then the chamber took it, and then that wasn't something they were gonna continue supporting.
okay.
So,
So it was a ESR, whatever.
Yeah.
It was just to put in, okay.
Mhm.
But it had nothing to do with this New Year's Needham.
no, New Year's Eve, we spun off as a nonprofit, so they were doing their own.
Okay. And I know COVID, David was telling me, kind of really hurt them quite a bit. Are they still, is that nonprofit still operational? Are they still considering this, or?
The last conversation I had with that was with Artie Cocker
Right.
last year. And it was in preparation for what would have been New Year's 2023 when he decided he wanted to. But my understanding, it's still something he's mulling around.
So is he on that board of that
Yes,
nonprofit?
Yes,
Okay,
yes. And actually, I thought, now that I recall, yeah, I think he posted actually something, somebody asked on Facebook about it, and I think he said he had some bring this.
okay, great. Thank you.
So Jim, it's tab 23-8, it's page 8
Okay.
of tab 20.
Yeah. Oh, there it is.
No, you can write it down so you can find it.
I believe the chair started New Year's meeting, is that correct?
But you didn't get the award.
I did not, I
It
gave
was,
it to Jean.
Jean Connell,
Yeah.
right? What's her name?
Yeah, I nominated Jean.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It was quiet in town. I
Yeah,
wasn't here.
very quiet, yeah. Okay, so shall we move to tab 25? Townwide expenses. Okay, so those were divided into two different sets of townwide expenses, depending on who was presenting. So these are the ones that are the town managers. So we'll start with group health insurance. Which is on tab 25-7. So with respect to group health insurance, right now, the budget is assuming a 10% increase as stated in the narrative. We'll have a better number in February once West Suburban gets a better number from the carriers. So I think something that's been a good trend for the last, 4 years is that we seem to have a flat number of enrollees in our health insurance plan. Plus or minus just 1 or 2. The town continues to assume, plus 10 in the budget, 5 individual, 5 family, just in case there are changes, and that, plus 10 totals about $187,000. With respect to the, other, well, I don't know, should I just keep going through, tab 20, stop at tab 25-7, see if there are any questions about health insurance? Before moving to the next? Are there any questions?
I guess is how does the 10% compare to prior years? Is that on this chart or?
I think we were assuming 7 or 8% last year.
It was 8% last year.
It's, I did check in with the chair of the West Suburban Health Group and he's using a 10%. And when we talk about the OPEB, you'll notice that the only change that they made to their assumptions is, increasing the outlook for health insurance. So, we do expect this to be, the foreseeable future, it's gonna be this high.
And is it another year of either mergers among some of the carriers?
So that's a great question. The, it's called 31 points?
Yeah, it's not something weird like that.
31, 32, there's 32 points on it, yeah. So what's happening is that Harvard Pilgrim is taking over all of our Tufts people, so we have something, we don't have all that many, maybe 80 Tufts folks. And they will be enrolled in the Harvard plan, so there isn't that much of a change, in store for us, although the lack of competition may impact rates. Yeah, but we are, the group is self-insured, so it is what it is in terms of.
And how are the reserves for the group?
And who's been, have you been?
Have used about 8 million of the reserves over the last 2 years. And part of the reason why they're concerned about the rate increase for fiscal 25, because they don't have
Any reserves?
reserves to mitigate the increase.
There was a significant portion of the group that was enrolled in Valley, so
Yep.
that change had a big impact.
Is there any contribution on the part of the employee?
Yes, it ranges, the town's contribution ranges anywhere from, I think that's a current low of 64% for Tufts family and 76.5% for Harvard individuals, so it's a range of, what the community pays, so the inverse of that is what we. For most of our senior plans who are on medics, it's a 50-50 split.
Do we have a choice of the payers, the insurance companies, or is that determined by West Suburban?
We have a choice of participating in West Suburban. I mean, there are other groups. but West Suburban itself would choose different vendors, and then, in a lot of ways, it gets bound up in collective bargaining. If there's an adverse impact on employees. We are now left, we will be left in, next year with Harvard and Blue Cross, which really are the big players.
How many towns are in West Suburban?
Just write that down.
31 or 32.
No, it's way down.
9 includes
9?
about 2 school districts, the collaborative in Dover, Sherburne Regional.
Thank you. I get that in a minute.
And do you have a pack or do you individually, negotiate the insurance?
We don't have a public employee, committee. We have an employee insurance advisory committee, which is the precursor, and it's been a very cordial relationship. The schools participate. We've always been able to bargain, so we haven't gone the route of the special legislation.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, so Medicare, Social Security, that really just depends on the number of employees. And I did ask questions on the increase, which is high at 5.3 and 5.2, but it is based on past 5 years average. Unemployment, we're self-insured. And I did ask for data earlier today on the total number of unemployment claims. And I believe it was 13 for the town and something like 48 or 53 for the school.
15 for the town and 53,
15 is 53.
for FY 23.
Well, yeah. Obviously, we don't know yet for FY 24, and the increase is just based on salary growth. Workers' comp and injured on duty, these are two reserve, funds basically that we contribute to. And we are approximately where we want to be with respect to the workers' compensation. And we just started the injured on duty fund, and we should talk about where we want that target to be, going forward. But the contribution is on par with where we want to be. The DSR fours relate to, the DSR fours that were put in by the various departments for additional employees and an assumption for the schools. So that number will change based upon what happens with the budget.
You might need the number of employees that have were requested.
The schools, it's around 10?
Correct, around 10 and about 7 positions, not all of them full-time, so, and
But 7 benefit eligible.
well, technically anybody, even, the summer help, there's Medicare and Social Security that Tom has to pay, so any personnel hiring has indirect costs as well. And those are all calculated, and you can see them on the individual DSR four sheets.
And it'll be in our budget, which is out for you.
Yeah, the DSR four request is for $260,000. And so depending on your assumptions relative to family or individual, it looks like about 15 to 20 potential new employees in the DSR fours, including schools. Okay,
As requested.
as requested, yeah, that's a DSR four. Those were the ones that were requested, yes. All right, any
Dave,
other
is that a
questions?
net or a gross amount? And the reason why I ask that is because Josh would know that through our discussions with the schools is that, certain of the persons that they're projecting as new positions next year are actually working right now.
Right.
And they're through current funds, they're able to have those positions, but yet the debate's not finished. They're considering them as new positions for next year. So they're obviously getting benefits now. These benefits here, are they in
They're
addition to what they're getting now, or how does that work?
They're prorated. There's a couple things with the school department, because the mix, and the, number of that participate in health plans is much different than on the town side. So we use a hybrid approach in terms of calculating the health insurance cost. In the case of existing employees, we look at what the incremental cost is for, if they're expanding an employee from a 0.3 to a 0.5, which would trigger a health insurance, and we have the health insurance. If they're currently at a benefit level that they're entitled to health insurance, it's just a matter of you have the required number of hours, you're in the health plan if you want the health plan. So for those employees, all we're looking at is what incremental cost would come in the case of Medicare, in the case of assessments for unemployment.
So you look at those 10 positions, let's say, and each one of them say, they might be in the system already right now. And so if that's the case, you would need to, you'd only increase by the incremental amount as opposed to the entire amount.
That's correct. And in fact, I have a series of questions I ask, in finance every year to explain the account. Are those all brand new positions or are they incremental increases? So I can get down to what that number should be.
See, great minds think alike, Dave. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on that?
I have a question about injury on duty. What's driving the increase in that?
You mean in the budget request?
Yes.
We increased both workers' comp and injury on duty by the general increase in salary, which is 4%.
Okay, it's a function of salary, not a function of
Correct.
employee. And so, I asked, have the number of claims or
I have that.
salaries?
I have the FY 23 numbers, which is, injury on duty claims is 15, town workers' comp is 12, and school workers' comp is 45 or 72. There was no request on the part of HR to significantly increase this line just by inflation, but, we're generally within where we have been in the last few years. The COVID years were very different.
And you're not anticipating any major settlements or? Okay. All right, OPEB, tab 25-17. So these numbers are based upon actuarial, investing. And so, we're still looking at full funding in fiscal year 2041. There is a big increase not a big increase, just an increase in our total liability based upon, a new assumption regarding future healthcare costs that increased our outstanding liability by about $2 million. So we're just under 50% funded. Our fund ratio is just under 50%. There is an additional DSR four request, and that's based on the anticipated employees. And there's an open report online if someone wants to read that. And my only, no, it's not a concern, it's just, I think it's very aggressive to fund OPEB for unknown employees at the moment.
Clarification, I guess, for that's the total of the new employees if they're approved.
If they're approved.
Correct,
Right.
and then there would be, funding.
Yeah.
So our budget will presumably be lower and yours will be more. If I could just add, Madam Chair, that I did do, I went through the Parex report on
Yeah.
all of the cities and towns, and I only found 10 cities and towns that had a higher funded ratio, and many of them were very small. We're pretty good shape. Our actuary said we were in the top 10% in the state.
Any questions regarding it? And Moody's loves municipalities funding OPEB. All right, retirement assessment. Basically, same thing. The retirement assessment is based upon an actual valuation. The assumptions have not changed from last year with respect to full funding or the, rate of return. So that number is, pretty much actuarially determined.
I have a question, I assume after like a year like last year when the stock market was up huge, that we have a fair amount of catch up. When do we find out sort of where we stand?
So we do an actuarial every year. The one we did as of 1/1/23 showed a market return of a negative 11.2
Right.
because that year was tough.
Right, 22 or so.
On an actuarial basis, though, we were up 6.4 because they smooth in gains and they smooth out losses. So over a 5-year period,
Okay.
it's recognized a fifth, a fifth, a fifth.
Okay,
So in that way, a 28% loss, which we had, after 2008, or a
Right.
really, really good gain, don't make our system go up and down. It smooths it out over time. So
Got it.
every year, happy to get you the actuarial. I find them fascinating reading
Yeah.
and, we're hoping that the retirement system is on a calendar basis. So the 1/1/24 should be very good for returns for
Right.
them. The OPEB is on a fiscal basis, which makes it a little harder to track.
Periodically, they'll change other things though, like, life expectancy and now
Right.
suddenly everybody's
Tables.
living longer. It's like, whoop.
Yeah.
They do make for fascinating reading.
We are, at 6.25, and I say this for Dick Bradley, he's
Mhm.
watching. At 6.25 at our low discount rate, there are only 3 systems lower than ours.
in
Most of
terms
them
of
are,
assumed return rate.
we are, there's 44 systems that have a higher funded ratio, but they tie together, right? Because
Right.
the lower the discount rate, the higher the. So that's a really good number, the 74.5 at 6.25.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that leaves us, I think, with classification, performance and settlements. And that is the line that is on tab 25-20. And that, accounts for in fiscal year 25, 2 collective bargaining agreements. And they're described on that page, the Independent Town Workers Association and the Independent Public Employee Association. It also includes the non-union employee, cost of living adjustments and any other performance-based, payments. There's nothing out of the ordinary with respect to those. I did ask about the procedure for non-union employees currently. Those recommendations, are presented to the Personnel Board. And then they go to the Board of Selectmen for a vote for approval. So, and if you manage to settle prior to printing of the budget book or the warrant, we'll move. Did we move? Or are
We
you
don't know
gonna
if town
leave
meeting
them?
is gonna.
Technically, town meeting has to.
Approve them first,
Right.
right?
And town meeting in its budget, in your budget article authorizes us
To transfer, okay, so you don't transfer. All right, never mind, I take that back. I was like, can we clean this up? so
Just
we
in
don't
case.
have to?
No.
We can't, okay. All right. So that's it, any questions?
Can I ask a question, just because Kate's here?
Mhm.
The, money that was, set aside for the Foster property, now that that deal is gonzo, are you able to say whether or not the select board are considering, putting those monies back by rescinding the, authorization?
I can't say they've discussed it. I think the open question is whether there's still an opportunity of some kind of any way of protecting any of that for the benefit of pedestrian access. So there would be conversation about that, but we will be talking to them about, what needs to happen to that money this spring, and we will involve you.
So just from my perspective, speaking again, just for me individually, plus the fact that citizens, occasionally will call me. I think there is a strong sentiment that the money should be returned and rescinded. And if there is some other project down the road, that the town and the town meeting might have an interest in, then, you know, you could take care of it at that time.
It is, the text of the warrant article is impossible for us to use it for its intended purpose. So we will be talking to you about what we do towards town meeting in May. But I totally understand.
Thank you.
I'm glad you brought that up, Jim, because I know, like, when I look at this, the capital book, we have a lot of things that's gonna be competing for funds this spring, and so I think it should be part of that discussion, because projects that we might be able to approve or want to approve, or might not want to approve, you know, having that money not be tied up will be important for those conversations, so I think it should happen sooner rather than later.
Is the forward schematic, did we hear that that's gonna be on the warrant in May?
I anticipate there will be,
And I think I heard the figure was around 4 million roughly, is that right?
just south of that, I think.
Yeah, okay, well, so then that's just one example only.
And that, it has to be cash under the, for feasibility, so we did recommend it as cash, but I still hear, so.
Got it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Debt service is going. So debt
That
service.
is coming down, which means we can do maybe some of those projects. All right, legal services, which is a tab
Stay within the cap,
third.
that's all.
sheet.
Call up Chris, Chris and Miles. Miles, you have a JD number? I hope you don't.
He does the math.
You know what?
Then no, you don't have one,
You don't want to be part of this one.
because I can't do math.
So this is a great budget because it's 2 pages. I had a hard time getting through it. But Chris was very, very helpful. And I'll just give you what I think are the highlights, which probably are, frankly, the highlights are longer than the presentation. So the $340,000 breaks down into basically 2 sets of legal fees. One are fees that are submitted by Chris's firm, which is now known as Harrington Heap. And then the second set of fees are those that are billed by special counsel for the town. Chris's firm has billed in through November of this 2023, $86,000, which roughly is $17,200 a month. If we just use that as kind of a placeholder times 12, you end up with an approximation of about $207,000 that Chris would estimate his firm would bill in this particular year of FY 25. Interestingly, when you look at the back, you know, the amount that Chris has billed plus the special counsel, it's been very, very consistent over the past 3 or 4 years, with one exception. And that was in 2022, when it was about almost $50,000 less. We don't really have a great explanation for that, except to say perhaps there weren't as much money spent within the special counsel fees, which I'll talk about in a second. And also there was some significant money spent in 2021 and 2020 on some COVID issues, which was expected, and all municipalities and public agencies had the same issue. And then in 2023, you know, there were some monies obviously spent with respect to the 1688 Central Ave property. So of that $340,000, roughly 207 is expected to be billed by Chris's firm. And then the remaining $133,000 is going to be expected to be billed by 5 special counsel. Cable licensing, and the firm is Epstein and August. Environmental, and that's McGregor and Laguerre. Labor is Myrick O'Connell. Water Management Act issues, which is basically one big class action, is Burns and Levinson. And then the planning board litigation is Mead Tollerman. And each of those figures I've given you, $207,000 from Chris's firm and the $133,000 from these 5 special counsel, also includes costs, which are billed as part of the invoice, reimbursable costs, and they're all done at no upcharge. It's simply whatever the firm has to pay, whether it's a deposition subpoena, anything along those lines. Chris's firm doesn't charge for travel time, copying and what a lot of firms do. The special counsel, I'm sure, probably spent a little bit more, especially the bigger firms like Burns and Levinson. Chris's rate, I will tell you, having done this for 23 odd years privately, is very competitive, $225 an hour. And I just got through a 4-year litigation with Foley Hoag, and I can tell you that the bills for one of the lawyers was greater than 1,000. So I think that's a very fair value. Of the 5 special counsel, there's only one outlier, and that's Burns and Levinson. And, you know, John, I know you know that firm, and they're typical of Boston. That's gonna be a heavy price to pay. But it's also not unreasonable. They're only somewhere in the vicinity of 500 to 700, which again is fairly inexpensive in Boston. And the other 4 firms who are special counsel, they're all on that blended rate of about $250 an hour, which again, I think is very, very reasonable. The only other thing I wanted to go over was a couple of just fun facts that I just wanted to focus in on. Chris was very, very helpful and very transparent. First, I did want to know what the total legal spend had been for 1688 Central. That has involved special counsel, as I mentioned earlier. Planning board litigation is handled by me, Tallerman. And then Chris's firm also did a little bit of that work, both before special counsel got involved, a little bit with special counsel, and then expected to be a little bit after. But the total of that is $62,000 for special counsel, and then Chris's firm would have some small amount of money in addition to that. It's hard to figure out what that amount is because you literally have to go through every single invoice and then just highlight the 1 or 2 items within a 20-item invoice that dealt with this particular property. It's not done by subject matter. It's done by just work on behalf of the town of Needham. So it's $62,000 plus Chris's firm, but I can tell you it's a lot less than $62,000. For the Foster property, there was no special counsel that was yet involved. That was just Chris's firm, and the total legal spend to date is $17,000. And then the last tidbit I wanted to check in on was I was very interested in the press release that was issued on November 7 after special town meeting, in which the law firm representing the owners of that property on Charles River Street basically said, you know, there's no deal with any purchaser for the property, which came as quite a surprise to Chris as well as to members of the select board and town manager's office. And what I found out, interestingly, is that on December 28th, so literally just last Thursday, the Foster family sold their land in 2 tranches. One is the major component of their property, which does include, as I understand it, the back acres that Conservation Commission was interested in, for $15 million. And it was sold to another real estate trust. And interestingly, and this is all public information, but interestingly, both of the trusts who owned the property, which was a trust formed on behalf of the Foster family through Choate, the law firm, sold it to another trust by a lawyer who was the trustee also from Choate. So Choate sold it to Choate for $15 million. The second parcel is the tranche of land that's right in the front of Charles River Street, and that was $3 million. So for the entire property, it was an $18 million sale. I asked Chris whether or not there's been any communication with respect to the new owner. And Chris has said that he has reached out to them just to see what their plans might be, but has not yet had any communication back from them. We don't know much about these realty trusts. Basically, the document you file with the registry is a 1-page document which tells you nothing, and deliberately. The name of the company is called Castle Farm Realty Trust. Doesn't mean anything to me. And the lawyer is named Popio, but I don't know if there's any relation to the Needham resident Popio. And Bill Lowell was the lawyer from Choate that represented the Foster Trust. So I just thought that was, you know, it was new information and important information. And I think the people that live in the, you know, Whiting, the Whitman Road area, Charles River Street and Central, you know, I think this will be information that they'll want to know, and I'm sure there'll be more facts and plans and strategies as we move forward. You know, I would again just offer, again, my own personal opinion and that which, you know, I've heard from some of the people who reside in the town, that the issue of open space is one that, you know, can be debated strongly both ways. I, as some of you might know, was on the side of preserving open space in the Wiswall property in the early 2000s, and also on the select board, the land that was next to Mitchell School at the bottom of James Road, where at one point in time, certain people wanted to develop that property for housing. So it's not that I'm not sensitive to the need to preserve open space. This particular open space, I think, has its challenges, at least from an enjoyment standpoint, from the majority of the citizenry. That being said, if that's what the Conservation Commission and the Select Board decide that is important for the town, that to me is a much different argument. Again, you could be for or against, but a much different argument than connecting it with land development and alleged affordable housing and changing the complete tenor and complexion of a neighborhood. That's a completely different thing. So we'll see how things move forward. And as I said earlier, I very much hope the select board will rescind that prior authorization so that it can be used for other purposes. And I want to thank Chris again for his help. And as I said, very transparent. I appreciate that.
What was that question?
Yes, I think in June, we appropriated a reserve fund transfer of $40,000 for the appeal of the planning board. I just want to know what happened, what has happened or not happened with that, those $40,000. Who can answer that for me?
Well, the only issue that I know that we spoke about is the fact that the planning board is about ready to issue a decision on something in the next week or two, or
Zoning Board of Appeals.
zoning board of appeals, I'm sorry. And when that issue when that decision is handed down, whoever is aggrieved, there's a strong likelihood there would be an appeal of that decision. And based on the appeal of that decision, if the town was an interested party, if the neighborhood decided to appeal, then there'd be more monies to be spent defending the appeal. If the decision went the other way and the developer was the defendant, then they would probably, that defendant would bear the brunt of the cost.
But I thought this 40,000 was before.
No, I agree. I'm just saying, I'm saying that's the second part of it.
Okay,
The first part of it, I don't know, you'd have to.
so was any of the 40,000 been spent?
My recollection, Miles, you might have it, is that we were going to run out of money for the bills that we had. I don't think it was specifically allocated for that.
That's
Yeah.
correct. So towards the end of last year, we did make that request for the $40,000 to be transferred over. The specific purpose of that was to increase the purchase order for Mead and Hallerman so that we could fulfill that. We ended up spending, the final purchase order for Mead and Hallerman was 60,000. We ended up spending $58,015. The overall expenditures ended up coming actually just shy of the initial budget amount of 329. We were unsure of the total billed hours based on that case was ongoing, correct me if I'm wrong, into June. And there was an uncertainty as to, and I think Chris could phrase it better, the duration and intensity of the work.
I believe the trial in that case occurred in June, so it would have been unclear, I think, at that time exactly how much they were going to spend.
But this was for an appeal, it wasn't for the trial, so the decision had already been rendered.
Not until August of last year was the decision rendered in the land court case.
So what was asked of us was money needed for an appeal. And if we came in through the budget, I guess what I want to know is where is that $40,000?
We'll turn it back.
Okay, so there'll be a plan that I'd just like to get an accounting.
Sure.
It closed out on June thirtieth, any bills, that money could only be expended for services provided up to June thirtieth. And the, balance was the free cash.
I'll follow up with you, we're just getting that information.
So I guess while we're on this topic, my understanding is that the planning board decided not to appeal the ruling against them.
Correct.
Were finances a consideration in that decision?
I can't. So I can't speak to the determination to, well, a couple of things. Although the planning board did not file an appeal on that case, there is still an appeal pending. There was an appeal filed from the land court decision by several abutters to the project who were not allowed to participate in the land court case, at the trial. So that appeal is still pending. So the case itself as a whole is still active, even though there was a determination made not to, appeal it by the planning board. So I guess while that case remains active in some capacity, and there is some possibility that it gets returned back to the trial court, I don't believe I'm at liberty to disclose, the discussions or the decision-making of the planning board as to why it made the decision that it did.
So I guess the reason why I asked is because no one asked the finance committee for reserve fund transfer. So I guess as far as we're concerned,
In August, you mean?
at
Whenever
the
it
time when
was.
the decision to make an appeal
Yeah.
was requested. So,
I don't know that one would have been necessary at the time that decision was being made, because there would have been plenty of money left in the, legal budget for the remainder of the fiscal year.
The only other thing I wanted to mention is that the increase this year is $10,860. It's a 3.3% increase. And it's basically just because of increased billing rates, mostly from Myrick O'Connell and Burns and Levinson.
I have a question on, like, procedurally, how are decisions made when, when do we bring in our town council and when do we not?
Can you clarify that a little bit? more?
Like, how do you decide you need to call them on something?
I don't know the answer.
Okay,
You know, there's a lot of things I do know. I've been doing this a long
yeah,
time, so
right,
as an example, prior town council would create the motions.
Yeah.
For town meeting, I do that.
Yeah.
Right, so, it really is, something where, there's, it needs to be exactly correct or would benefit from council. Do you have a better answer than that?
I don't know if it's a better answer, it's sort of an addendum to that. I will say that I do note that in Needham, as compared to a number of other towns that we do work in, oftentimes, the answer will come to us almost fully formed by Kate and her staff. Whereas oftentimes in other towns, it'll come to us, as a blank slate, well, here's the question, how do we answer it? Oftentimes here, just staff, know the answer or come close to know the answer, and oftentimes you're looking for confirmation that, they've answered the question correctly, and it's a matter of saying, yes, you have, or here's some additional things you might want to think about. So that's just I think, observation that I have working in town, that, the level of, we're needed in a lot of cases to answer a lot of questions, but oftentimes the level of expertise that is brought to bear on a legal question before it even gets to us is notable.
I guess my other question is ancillary to that, so who's the gatekeeper if, like, you've got a particular board or a number of boards that have questions, like, how do they ask their questions of town council?
I would say most board members will call you direct, but many will call me and say, can I ask town council this? And I'll say, of course.
Yeah.
So that's just sort of what they do, but you do talk to them fairly often.
Typically, the chair
Yeah,
of
the
a board will reach out to me. It is that there are some cases when I will hear questions directly from an individual board member, but that's infrequent. And it doesn't happen terribly often. So I think I would say Kate department heads, Katie, Dave, Miles,
Yeah.
all, I hear from fairly routinely. Other than that, it would be department heads and board chairs primarily, although, they can certainly be a broader range than that.
I had one last thing, Chris, you sent me some information this afternoon, I appreciate it. The only thing and maybe you sent it, I just haven't had a chance to look at it during the meeting. But I do want to try and go back again on that issue we were discussing about, when it was that the deal for the Foster property, fell apart. I mean, obviously on November 7 of 2023, they said the deal doesn't exist. That, we know that. I need those emails. I don't think I have those. I have the press release, but I don't have the emails that came in from the firm.
It was November 7th.
November 7, yeah. And then, but I'd like to go back in time. I don't want to just assume that was the final communication as to the fact the deal was no longer viable, because again, as I mentioned to you, it was my sense that there may have been other communications that occurred sometime in either the spring or the summer that, might have shed some doubt as to whether or not the deal was really at that time still in existence. And the reason I bring it up is that I think in full transparency to the town meeting and to the citizens, when they're being asked to vote on even something that's non-binding resolution, nevertheless, I think it's important that, all the facts about the potential status of the transaction, are as accurate as we can have them. So, and I know reasonable minds can differ as to what a communication may or may not mean, but at least that'll give me my reasonable mind or unreasonable mind a chance to review it.
I'm happy to share all of my communications with, the seller in the run up to town meeting and throughout the fall before that. I guess the one, anecdote that I probably should have shared when we spoke earlier, but didn't think of it, is that there was a walking tour of the Foster property. I want to say the Sunday before, either immediately before town meeting or a week before town meeting. But there was a tour that occurred with the Foster's permission, and was led by, the broker who was representing the sellers in the transaction. So there was, as recently as either a day or a week before the October town meeting, we were being allowed to lead a walking tour over the property by the sellers themselves.
Which may or may not mean that there was or was not a deal still on the table.
There was, it's clear enough that there was no contract in place to authorize anybody to purchase the property. It was understood that we were all working toward entering into another round of contracts that would allow us and Northland to purchase the property.
Yeah, and
But-
and we can debate it, but we're not going to. Because no one else wants to hear our debates. But I think looking at all those documents, even going back to the spring and the summer, will be very, very helpful.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any question?
Just to follow up on what you said, I mean, it's not, the cost to town council, but the Foster is 17,000, but I'm just thinking in terms of cost to time for everyone involved. And it still was a large, I think the town put a lot of resources in it, and I hope that in the future, we can make sure we have all the documents in place, like a purchase and sale agreement in place before we go to town meeting, before we engage in all this, so that we can have something in the end. Because it was really a shame that the way it went.
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we have municipal parking. Also that.
This was an extremely controversial budget.
Very controversial.
We spent an inordinate amount of time debating, discussing, querying. Most of
But we
the
do have to ask
senior leadership of
Celia.
DPW. It did.
How is your new job?
It's good.
Keeping me busy. Yeah. We're keeping Dave in line.
Anyway, so we did review the budget with the whole DPW department this afternoon. So municipal parking is, the expenses are really fall into two or three buckets. The primary expense is the what the town pays to lease private land for municipal parking. That's the bulk of the expense, and the one significant increase in this budget of $10,920 represents an anticipated deal with the MBTA to rent an additional 13 spaces at the Center at the Heights. The primary reason for this is to acquire spaces closer to the entrance for better ADA access. Right now, all the dedicated spaces are behind the building where there isn't ADA access. It is, we also, they're in the process of procuring a generator for the CAP, which is gonna end up taking up 3 existing spaces. So net, they are gonna gain 10 spaces. The additional 13 spaces will cost about $70 per month. The other expenses in this group have to do with the maintenance of the parking areas. Salaries or the overtime expenses are for town employees that provide like street sweeping and some of the maintenance of the flower beds, I guess, or the shrubbery that people do on an overtime basis. And that's consistent with prior years. There's also some contracted services. But all in all, it's a basically flat budget with the exception of this one additional parking, the rental additional space at the CAP. I did ask some questions. We had some questions earlier, just I'm curious what our revenues were.
Yep, okay, we'll find the answers. So for parking meters, we took in FY 23 $69,872.48. So a whole lot of coins. For municipal parking permits, we took in $78,180. The town has about 60 passes, and so far we've issued 58 this year.
16 spots.
60.
60 for town
yeah.
employees, but and
And then
the
you
others are, what is it, 120 or for commercial?
It was, you had the number. It was a lot.
It was many, it was high 400s. Which is more permits than spaces. 411, low 400s,
Wow.
for a total of 82,200 annual.
How do we sell more permits and spaces, I guess?
First come, first served.
Yeah, I'm assuming they don't need all this space at the
Not all
same
there
time.
all the time,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah, okay, I like it.
But you said we haven't really received any complaints about the.
Not recently, not since the pandemic.
Should be fine.
150% utilization, it's hard to do.
In other parts of life, you could go to jail for that.
Anyway. You guys have anything else to add? I think,
No.
so all the money goes into the general fund, correct?
Yeah.
Parking meters as well?
Yeah.
Any thought to automating like every other town that have done?
What happened to the study? Wasn't there a big study?
That was one of the things that the study looked at.
Is that done? Is the study done?
The parking study is done, yeah.
So what did they decide?
Before you study.
Yeah.
And we have a meeting next week on the automated.
Oh, so there'll be an unveiling at some point?
I like the meters.
Big secret.
Questions from members? I have a question about the Episcopal Church lot. That's the one that's across from the library. Wasn't the library carrying for years,
The project carried it. And then we took it.
but they had it in their state aid budget.
did we ever charge the library out of their state aid budget for that?
John, you may be able to help me, but I believe there was 10 years where they paid and then we took it. Does that sound?
Yeah, well, I think it was, the original lease was 10 years.
It was 10 years and then the town took over the payments, so, okay. Cause I know they were carrying the follow-on years in their state aid budget. They had an encumbrance for a very long time. Okay. Any other questions?
The only thing I would say is, for us old people, I don't really understand how to do the number 413 into your phone thing. So I don't, I have no idea how to do it. I mean, how do you do it?
It's on the app.
Okay, I don't-
Walk through, download
All
the app
right,
and
hold on, I'll just say, oh, I don't see the app.
We're gonna keep the coins.
I've got coins, I've got that. Thank
For
you.
a while.
Oh, my God.
Okay.
Can I come to this meeting next week?
Hey, that's what you get when you get someone from the 90s, right, Paul? We're back and we kind of bring everything back to us.
Any other questions?
I get laughed at my kids because they always find the coins in my car. I'm like, what coins? If I live in Needham.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Sorry that we didn't have more questions for you.
No, she was very helpful this afternoon.
We find the committee updates.
The next, workshop, public workshop, it's going to be in the form of a public hearing, is for the housing meeting, advisory group is, January 18th. That's what the MBTA community is. We're meeting a lot.
I mean, in terms of, it's not a huge amount of resistance, I don't get a sense.
There's been a lot of articles in the local papers on this whole thing.
Yeah.
Milton, was even gonna try to do a citizens petition, passed town meeting, not by a ton, but it passed. I don't know, but they say they're gonna try and put it on the ballot, so there's just a,
They are having one, they got enough signatures for it.
oh, they did
Put in the ballot to,
reverse the vote of the
Oh.
town meeting.
wow,
We've gotten a lot of public comments. And they're not all supportive. I mean, they're.
no, I appreciate it, but it doesn't seem to be like what's gone on in Newton, for example.
Paying attention to as much, I guess.
Josh Carroll and I had our second liaison meeting with the schools yesterday. We have one more in 2 weeks, and then they'll be coming to us on the 17th. The overall requested increase is a little bit over 6%. The big drivers are salary increases and, special ed, our district tuition. And, we've been doing a lot of digging and we'll continue to do on that, so
I
you'll,
have no doubt.
you'll hear from us on that on the 17th, but that's ongoing.
Okay. Other updates? The housing authority reached out to me. They would like to talk to us about their, plans, capital plans. So they'll be coming in on the 17th after the school, department, and I think we're keeping PBC that night as well. And then I think it was Quiet Zone folks wanted to come in and talk to us. And so I asked them to come in sometime in February. I don't have a date set yet, but we'll wait until sometime then.
So when's our next meeting? Next Wednesday?
Next Wednesday, yeah.
It's pretty much every Wednesday.
It's every Wednesday now,
Until we get to like the middle of, end of February or something.
Got my new calendar.
There you go. All right, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent, meeting is adjourned at